Good evening and welcome to the 2022 annual meeting of the Economic Development Council of Livingston County. My name is Nathan Bird. I'm the Livingston County Administrator, and I've also had the pleasure over the last year of chairing the board of the EDCLC. It's wonderful to be with you all again here tonight. I can't believe it's been a year since the last annual meeting. It's gone really, really fast, but it's great to be back tonight. In a little while, we're going to have a panel discussion, and I want to welcome the guests who are going to be joining us for that discussion. Jasmine Kaur, the CEO of CultureBee, Marianne Marr, the Executive Director of Real Estate with Consumers Energy, and Dan Roman, a software developer with Menlo Innovations. We're going to be talking about the workplace in a little bit. Janelle Best from the Howe Chambers is going to moderate that discussion, and no pressure on us, but last year's panel was really interesting, so we need to make sure that we do a good job tonight, and I'm sure we'll do fine. I want to thank all of our generous sponsors of tonight's event. That includes Comcast, DTE, Consumers Energy, Trinity Health, ITC, Bank of Ann Arbor, Lake Trust Credit Union, KW Corporation, and Ranger Power. We are very thankful for these businesses and community partners that help make this event possible, and also for being part of our collaborative efforts to continue to build Livingston County's economy. I want to thank our municipal partners. We have highlighted local municipal partners. I think they're on the screen. Hopefully you can see those. There are wonderful communities full of wonderful people, and we appreciate their partnership throughout the county. In addition to our municipal partners, I want to thank the Livingston County Board of Commissioners. They're my boss in my day job, so I certainly have to thank them. But we appreciate their ongoing investment with the Economic Development Council. We appreciate them recognizing the importance of this partnership. I think I saw Commissioner Griffith here tonight somewhere. So yeah, thank you, Commissioner Griffith, for being here. And certainly want to continue to grow that partnership with our board over the next few years. I want to thank our private sector investors, over 25 strong, that help fund the EDCLC programs and make business retention, expansion, and attraction efforts possible. These are companies that believe in collaboration and help us create a strong economy that support operations. We thank you so much for your support tonight and ongoing. And I want to acknowledge the Ann Arbor Spark team. Since 2012, the EDCLC has partnered with Ann Arbor Spark to provide professional staff here in Livingston County who have worked very closely with private and public entities to help facilitate community and economic development activities, to implement strategic initiatives, and to be involved in collaboration that benefit our employers, our schools, and all of our Livingston County communities. So they have constantly proven their commitment to advancing success in the county. It's been great for me this year to get to know the Spark team better here in Livingston County. I had an opportunity to be with CEO Krutko earlier today, and that was a great conversation. And so we thank you all with Spark for what you do. And thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for your support. It is my pleasure to invite Nick Jablonski from Ann Arbor Spark. He's a business development manager for Livingston County, and he's going to present this year's awards. Nick?
Thank you, Nathan, and good evening. We're excited once again this year to recognize the businesses and local organizations in Livingston County for this year's awards, and we have a short video for each award. And tonight's first one is the Resilience Award for Livingston County.
The Resilience Award is presented to Flexible Metal Incorporated. Flexible Metal is a global leader in engineering and manufacturing exhaust manifolds, bellows, EGR tubes, and other tubular assemblies, including the exciting new Chevrolet C8 Corvette exhaust manifold. After more than 30 years in the automotive and diesel truck market, Flexible Metal's Hamburg facility has learned to adapt to the changes in the industry. Historically, it focused on supporting parts for traditional internal combustion engines. But as the market made significant shifts to alternative power solutions, Flexible Metal, once again, flexed its innovative strengths to remain competitive. The electrification of the automotive market is in full swing and rapidly evolving, as is Flexible Metal. It captured an opportunity that leverages its internal strengths to address a critical customer need in this EV market. Flexible Metal has been awarded resilience as a business due to its innovation, customer-centric engineering solutions, rapid project development, and significant capital investment.
We want to thank the Economic Development Council of Livingston County for recognizing the incredible efforts of Flexible Metal here in Hamburg. Our team has been resilient in the face of a shifting market. We've gone from producing products specifically designed for the internal combustion engines to developing a completely new and innovative EV solution in record time. This is a real game changer for Flexible Metal and the success of the Hamburg plant. This project will require significant investment over the next year and will create 30 to 45 new manufacturing jobs here in Livingston County. We could not have done this without tremendous efforts of our talented workforce. As a 100% employee-owned business, our employees share in the challenges and are personally invested in the success of the business. Our staff rallied together, accomplished our goals, and overcame great hurdles to secure a successful launch. Thanks again to our hardworking people here at Flexible Metal and to the EDCLC for honoring Flexible Metal's resiliency.
At this time, I'd like to ask the Flexible Metal team to come up and receive your award. I'd like to now move on to our Talent Innovator Award for the year.
The Talent Innovator Award is presented to Livingston Educational Service Agency. Livingston ESA is a service agency specializing in education. They are one of Michigan's 56 educational service agencies, also known as intermediate school districts. They employ over 650 people that provide a wide variety of special education, early childhood, career development, and collaborative services to the public and private schools in Livingston County daily. Their services are centered around advancing student literacy, narrowing the socioeconomic achievement gap, supporting students' social and emotional well-being, improving student opportunities to learn, and helping schools by streamlining transportation, broadening the availability of student services, and providing professional development opportunities to enhance the skills of teachers and staff.
Livingston ESA connects so many students to different regional employers with career paths so that they know what they want to do when they leave high school.
Our career development department is an exciting part of Livingston ESA, as we have all sorts of opportunities for students to connect with employers through their career technical education courses, early college programs, as well as the different events that we run through our career development, like our manufacturing day, job shadow day, and our youth employment fair. So the overall goal is to create the ideal career and college-ready graduate. Ann Arbor Spark has been integral in connecting us with employers that are interested in finding their next talent pipeline.
For the last 11 years, Ann Arbor Spark has come into Livingston County and have partnered with us. My hope for the future would be that we continue to grow as a partnership and provide opportunity for students to get to see more industries, make sure that students know they can live and work in Livingston County, whether they go on to college and come back from college or they go right into the workforce after high school. Thank you, Ann Arbor Spark, for this award. We appreciate your partnerships, connecting ourselves and our students with the local area businesses. We couldn't do it without you, and thank you so much.
I'd like to ask Livingston ESA to the stage. Finally, I'm pleased to present and recognize our 2023 Project of the Year.
The Project of the Year is presented to Total Security Solutions Incorporated. Total Security Solutions is the leading nationwide custom bulletproof barrier manufacturer and installer. Since 2004, Total Security Solutions has designed, engineered, fabricated, and installed over 25,000 ballistic systems in locations worldwide. They offer ballistic solutions that provide both safety and aesthetics to fit any unique space. Total Security Solutions' three unique qualities are customer experience, customization, and speed. Their proven process is focused on an exceptional customer experience, and it's one of their strongest differentiators in the industry. They begin each project by listening to understand the unique needs and objectives of their customers. This collaboration allows them to provide expert guidance, deliver a superior solution, and a seamless experience. Total Security Solutions expertise has been refined over the course of 25,000 plus solution-driven projects. Handling all phases of fabrication in-house makes their lead times the fastest in the industry for customized ballistic systems. Unique to the industry, they have a fully staffed department for design, project management, engineering, fabrication, and installation. This team approach allows them to execute their proven process with a sense of urgency and speed. In 2021, Total Security Solutions acquired Bulldog Innovative Manufacturing, located next door to Total Security Solutions facility in Fowlerville, Michigan. Acquiring Bulldog has allowed for the continued growth of both companies and has expanded their combined manufacturing capabilities. Major investments continue to be made in the people, processes, facilities, and equipment at Bulldog to ensure continued delivery on their three unique qualities.
I'd like to thank Ann Arbor Spark for all the support they've given Total Security Solutions over the years. It's been a big part of our success and will continue to be a big part of our success in the future. We're really excited about the acquisition next door of Bulldog Innovative Manufacturing. They've allowed us to expand our footprint both physically and expand our capabilities into the marketplace. We picked up a very sophisticated manufacturer in the metalworking industry, and we're excited about the opportunities that's going to provide us. Over this past year, we continued to invest in their capabilities in the building next door with renovation projects. Again, I want to thank the Ann Arbor Spark for years of continued support, and we look forward to continuing to grow with them over the years.
Next, I'd like to ask Amy to the stage. Yeah. Now I'd like to introduce and welcome Sean Riley with Trinity Health to the stage for a few words, and thank you for your team to be here today as a gold sponsor.
Thank you. So thank you all for allowing me to come here for just a few minutes and talk about what we're doing to fix healthcare at Trinity Health. No short order there. So how many of you have heard of clinically integrated networks, or CINs? Cool. I didn't think I was going to get anybody. That's awesome. All right, best kept secret, right? So CINs, besides providing me with the best introduction ever, because I get to say I represent the CIN of a faith-based organization, which is kind of fitting. It's also the vehicle that Trinity has chosen to invest in throughout the country to really promote population health. And what do I mean when I say promote population health? I mean that we're literally working to fix healthcare. We're improving care, and we're lowering costs. And we've been doing this since way before the terms like innovation and disruption and value-based were cool. And we've been doing this for insurance companies for well over a decade, almost 2 decades. And so we thought, why don't we just have this conversation directly with employers? And so we did a few years ago. And we created a direct-to-employer product and now have a pretty respectable portfolio of employers who are working with us directly to improve the health of their employees. So what does that product look like? And DTE is not the company that's sponsoring you today. It's another one of our fun healthcare acronyms. But what does that product look like? It has 3 main components. The first is custom data analytics. We have analytics not only with claims, but with clinical analytics and clinical data. And we get notifications real time when an employee goes into the hospital, is transferred from the hospital, goes into the emergency room. And we can real time deal with the issues at hand instead of waiting until a year later when the claims come through. So we sit down and we meet with our employer groups a couple times a year and we steer course and improve health. The second, if there are any HR people out there, you will love us because our employer HR teams love us. We provide navigation. No health system is perfect, we know that. And our navigators, a couple of them here at the table, you raise your hand, actually help patients, help employees navigate through the system in things like finding the best tiered provider for their benefit to maximize their benefits, or dealing with claims issues, or unclogging a backlogged schedule. So, and it's not just employees that contact us, it's actually their spouses and their kids as well. So about 35% of them come from family members. And then the last thing is care management. Care management is really the safety net that helps people as they navigate through our system. And without those care managers, people tend to fall through the cracks. And I would put our care managers' engagement rate up against any insurance company at just under 70%. We have employers who want us to call every single patient, every single employee who goes into the ER, and we do. So I'm going to leave you with a story, real life story, the infamous peanut butter story. So this ties it all together. We had a patient we inherited. We started looking through her data. We found that she went into the ER 33 times in the previous year. Now, she was on a lot of medicine, but the medicine should have managed these conditions that she was going into the emergency room for. So the care manager said, I'm going to go to this patient's home. You can find out a lot more about a person when you see the environment that they live in. Care manager says, all right, first things first, why don't you go get your meds? I want to see how you're taking them. Patient, true story, goes into the kitchen, comes out with a jar of peanut butter, sets it in the middle of the table. There you go. Care manager's like, what's that? You guys have me on so many meds, I can't keep up. So I go get them filled, and I put them in this jar of peanut butter. And I take a teaspoon a day, and I take it about the same time every day. So I figure it all balances out. Well, that was an easy fix. We got her on pill pack. She doesn't have to think about it. And as a matter of fact, we had our pharmacy team go in and found that that woman was taking 2 meds that she should have stopped taking. So we fixed her up. She went into the ER 1 time in the last year and a half. And that's a great example because, the cost of these ER visits were over $1,000 at least every time, 33 times. And she didn't want to go in the ER either. She didn't want to feel bad. She didn't want to be sick. So, thank you for listening to me today. I'm always happy to talk to you. I've got a techie and somewhat snarky colleague that came up with this slide, so you can either take a picture with your phone and you can get a hold of me, or apparently you can send something via carrier pigeon and I'll respond to that too. So whatever, I'm just always happy to talk about this work. So thank you so much for your time. And I want to introduce you to John O'Malley too, one of our local hospital presidents. He's going to stick around and talk to you about this stuff when we're done. So thank you so much for your time. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Paul Krutko, President and CEO of Ann Arbor Spark.
Well, good evening. What a great turnout this evening. I want to thank you, Sean and Trinity Health for your support and joining us this evening. We also really want to, again, congratulate Total Security Solutions, Flexible Metal, Inc., and the Livingston Educational Service Agency. These awardees represent what we try to accomplish through partnerships and collaborations and are a positive reflection of the EDCLC's efforts. For the past 12 years, it's been Spark's privilege to partner with the EDCLC. You know, Scott Griffith is here. He was one of the instigators of this. I had just arrived, and I told my staff I wouldn't go off script, so anyway. I had just arrived here and taken the position as CEO of Ann Arbor Spark in 2011. And Scott was very, very interested in how we could help Livingston County achieve some of the things that we were achieving in Washtenaw County, and we welcomed that opportunity. So it has been a privilege. I'm entering my 12th year here, and I feel like my tenure and the tenure of the work here in Livingston County has been in parallel. So we really appreciate the opportunity to help execute this county's vision and mission for retaining and attracting and growing businesses. Every locality, every county, every place is different, and having local leadership to help define what happens in a community is incredibly important. So I do want to express my appreciation to the board for continuing the partnership with Ann Arbor Spark and keeping our team very busy here in Livingston County. And I also would encourage you, many of you have, but please go ahead and enjoy your salads and dinner while I'm talking with you. It's been a substantial year of growth in Livingston in terms of our work. To date, in 2022, our Livingston Business Development team has worked on 6 separate company growth projects. Those have resulted in 108 new and 185 retained jobs and more than $14.5 million in private sector investment. We just recognized 2 of those projects for their accomplishments in adding new investments in Livingston County, Total Security Solutions and Flexible Metal. But the point on this effort in economic development, it's consistency over time. I often joke with my wife, who's a very fast walker, that I'm the turtle and she's the hare. And to some extent, the work in economic development is more of the turtle variety of consistent effort over time to achieve significant results. So that's one of the things I'm proud to share with you tonight, that since 2012, Spark has supported 60 projects, resulted in 1,500 new jobs in Livingston County and $340 million in private sector investment. So a little bit every year, we move it in the right direction. But, however, ensuring that Livingston County's businesses of all sizes have resources for continued success is foundational to Spark's mission. Our success and cumulative of big and small projects throughout the county is what our team works to accomplish. One that they would like me to highlight tonight is Captain Joe's Wood-Fired Pizza as an example. Supported by the relationship that Spark has with the city of Brighton, this was a popular food truck, and it had a growth goal to have a permanent brick and mortar location on Main Street in downtown Brighton, where it can grow its specialty pizza business, and we've been able to help them accomplish that. Attraction and retention projects establish a solid foundation in which communities can build and is a strong indicator of what the future holds. The important for us is we see this as a virtuous cycle. Those companies' investments, those new hires that they bring on into the community provide ongoing revenue for local governments to invest in services and infrastructure. By continuously working to retain and expand businesses that are already here and to attract new employers to the region, we continue to build Livingston County's economic foundation. We in the last year, with our board, which has a representation from the EDCLC as well as from the Lake Trust Credit Union, that's headquartered here in Livingston County. We worked on an update to our strategic plan. This is our 3rd iteration since I've been with the organization as CEO. I had many deep conversations among our board by what we've all lived through. Pre-COVID, there was a certain track of how business was done and how we all engaged in that. And we had major change happen to us. Just if you think about the concept of remote working, which was something that many, many employers were fearful of pre-pandemic. So it's clear to us that there's a sea change going on now in how people work, where they live, and what they value. The pandemic also exacerbated economic inequities and made progress on environmental sustainability more difficult. But our board believes that this virtuous cycle of economic growth that I described, creating opportunity for families and individuals, and creating then the resources for the community to grow and be better, is why we want to keep tackling these major challenges facing our communities. The strategy of smart growth in the service of prosperity for all will respond to these challenges and create opportunities that will benefit our region. To deliver on this shared purpose with a strong commitment to equity and environmental stewardship, Spark will focus its efforts in the next 3 years on 4 objectives that have the potential to develop and deliver value, mitigate risks, and our strengths of our organization. So the first is acceleration. As many of you in the room know, we are very aggressive over the 2 decades we've been in existence of seeding new tech companies so they grow and take root here. We also have the second objective that we are focusing on is growth, which is nurturing existing companies like we saw tonight in the award presentations so that they will locate here, stay here, and grow here. The third, and we had an awardee in this category, is in the area of talent, where we're working to cultivate talent in the workforce so our people can thrive when we bring new job opportunities and investments here. And finally, the board determined that it really wanted to add a 4th goal to what we had been working on for many years, which was about community. And that is a sense of enriching the local community to better enable smart growth. So before Marcia comes to the stage, I wanted to extend a special recognition to the departing member, one of the departing member of the EDCLC board, and a good friend, and someone who has also partnered with her brother in this notion of what we were doing here in Livingston County, and that's Commissioner Carol Griffith. Carol has served as a commissioner for 12 years. She supported this relationship from the ground up. And additionally, for the past 2 years, she served on the commission as the liaison to this board. She's been a strong advocate for the EDCLC and Ann Arbor Spark's work. She's leaving a strong legacy of forward-thinking and collaborative leadership as she steps down as commissioner. So please join me in acknowledging and applauding Carol for her dedication to Livingston County and the EDCLC. So I'm done. And I'm now going to welcome Marcia Gorowski as she kicks off tonight's panel discussion. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. Before I introduce tonight's panel, I wanted to also make a special recognition. The work Spark does for the county is successful because of collaborations and partnerships across all sectors. Kathleen Klein-Hudson has been one of those great partners to the Spark Livingston team. Kathleen is currently the director of the planning department for Livingston County and is retiring after 30 years of service with Livingston County. So a little unknown fact, as an undergrad, I took on an internship here with the county, and Kathleen was my mentor for that summer, partway between your 30-year term with the county. But I wanted to extend my gratitude to Kathleen for being a leader in the field, a terrific collaborator with us, and highlighting and our opportunities to highlight how we can combine community planning and economic development. So thank you, Kathleen, for your service, and we are certainly going to miss and appreciate your work with the Spark team. So thank you. So as we get into our panel discussion, I'm just going to call up the panel members and our moderator, and if everybody could take their seat, and then we will get this evening's event kicked off. So moderating our panel this evening is President of the Howell Area Chamber of Commerce, Janelle Best. We have panel member Nathan Bird, County Administrator for Livingston County. Jasmeet Kaur, Founder and CEO of Culture Bee. Mary Ann Marr, Executive Director of Real Estate for Consumers Energy, and Dan Roman, who is a software consultant with Menlo Innovations. And tonight we are going to have a conversation on redefining normal and adapting to new workplace expectations. So thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Marcia. Welcome to our panelists. Nobody wants to sit close to me. Am I supposed to sit down? If I want to. All right, I guess I'll sit down. That way we can all sit and get nice and cozy. All right. Let's see. Okay. Now I can see the clock a little bit better, too. All right, so last year we had a discussion about basically attracting talent, the talent shortages, and now we're talking about retaining and what this different environment looks like and all of the changes that we've had since. So we're going to start off tonight with our first question, which is what have been the biggest lessons, good, bad, or otherwise, that you've learned with hybrid changes to work over the past few years? And we're going to start with Dan.
All right. I don't know about the rest of the panelists, but one of the interesting things that was actually a bit of a boon for Menlo was we would previously do in-person tours where people had to come to the basement of a parking garage in Ann Arbor to come and see kind of this weird and quirky way that we work. And the pandemic forced us into this hybrid situation where we were suddenly able to democratize it such that you could dial in from, we've had people from China and Japan and Australia, very late for them, but we're able to democratize it. They were able to join us when otherwise they would have to fly in and, you know, come to us. It was a really great boon in that way.
All right. Did I lose my, there we go. All right, so Marianne, how about you?
So thanks for having us, but I think the one thing that we learned working for a utility, we showed up. We showed up every single day throughout the pandemic to serve our customers, to answer to storms, to do everything, and it takes a tremendous amount of commitment from our employees and our team. So that's something that we were really proud of what we did. I think from a lessons perspective, the speed that we rolled out technology. It was one moment we were in the office. My team works in an environment that is paper-driven. We do deals, we do contracts. Next thing you know, it's like we are all remote. We relied on Teams, but normally for our IT group to roll out new technology, it's probably a year or 2 years, and they got to test it and do all these things, and it doesn't work. Within a week, we were all rocking and rolling. And it was amazing how everyone embraced it and worked through the issues. So that was a really good lesson for us, that we can do things faster and better.
Absolutely, and I saw a lot of head nodding, not only up here, but in our audience, so I think a lot of people agreed. This is a question for all of our panelists, so Jazz?
Can you hear me? Yep. That's working. So I lead a company called Culture Bee, and we do people analytics. And that means we analyze employee data for companies to help them improve their hiring and retention rates. So we had the good fortune of analyzing a lot of survey feedback data. We looked at data for over 15,000 employees over the last couple of years, spread across several companies. And the key thing that I learned was that while the pandemic affected everyone, the key effect that it had on employee morale was that it amplified what was already there. And what that means is that companies where employees were engaged and satisfied and happy, they were generally satisfied with the work arrangements that were made, with any kind of hybrid in-person work that was happening. Now, companies where the employees were unhappy, they just became more unhappy. So the pandemic was this back to basics moment, where what we learned is that it doesn't matter whether you work remotely or in person. What really matters is whether good management principles are at play and leaders who are listening to their employees and at least making a sincere effort in taking their input into consideration while making decisions about them. So,
awesome, thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, one of the big lessons for me is that it's okay to change your mind sometimes. When the pandemic started, I was somebody who would have been really hostile towards the idea of remote work in the public sector. And I'm representing the public sector, so I'm going to be talking a lot about government tonight. I would have thought that it wouldn't have been well received and that it wouldn't have really been possible. And when I came to the county, the pandemic was just a few months old, and I remember thinking, oh, this pandemic thing's going to be over real soon, and then we'll get back to normal. And we haven't gotten back to normal. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when we were forced to have remote work opportunities for our staff, we learned that it's not a bad thing necessarily. Now, again, in the public sector, you can't have all remote work. You have to have sheriff's deputies and paramedics and all sorts of people providing frontline public service. But we have many departments and many employees that it really doesn't matter where they're sitting. They can do their work from anywhere, and it's been a good lesson for me to learn. I think we're going to have to be open to changing our minds as the workplace continues to evolve and develop over the next few years. I think one issue we're dealing with, and again, remote work it's not widespread in the county, but it is possible in certain positions. But we just have a perception that we have to work through that, government can't work remotely. There are certainly some positions that can, and sometimes we don't have the best reputation anyway among people, us government workers. But we certainly have found ways to do it in a way that enhances productivity, not just maintains it, but actually maybe makes us more productive. So we want to be working through that perception, making sure people understand that as government, we need to be nimble, we need to be responsive. As we're interviewing applicants for job, we're hearing an awful lot about work-life balance and remote work and flexibility. So we're dabbling in all that now, and so far the results have been positive.
Awesome, thank you. And we're seeing this shift, and this is exactly why we're having this conversation tonight, right? So I'm going to have you answer the next question, Nathan. You can start us off here, and this is, again, a question for all of our panelists. We've seen changes in the workplace, a lot of them that we've just talked about, including hybrid versus in-person. What changes have you observed in your teams, how they work together, and particularly how they're spread out geographically?
Yeah, so our facilities are spread out all over Howell and even other parts of the county. So we've always been spread out geographically. But what we found, most of our employees who can work remotely, they're not doing it every day. It's more of a hybrid situation for us. And so we haven't really lost that in-person ability to make connections and have face-to-face interactions. We also can, of course, have face-to-face interactions by pushing a button on our computer now and faces pop up on it, which is something that is pretty cool when they are working remotely. But one example that I use, especially with people who are skeptical of it, is I have 14 departments that report to me as county administrator, and so we have meetings all the time, but we try to have one big group meeting first Thursday of every month where the 15 of us get together and talk. We do those completely virtually now. Why in the world do I need to make them get in their car, drive down to my conference room, and then get in their car and drive back to work when we have the exact same conversation with the exact same people virtually? It actually helps productivity. It allows them to save some time in their day and keep working. So that's been a good thing, and it's one small example of something that we've shifted. I would also say that it's been really good because our Board of Commissioners, there was a time period there where when all the different rules and regulations were in place, our public meetings had to be virtual. A little awkward. You've got your 9 commissioners on a Zoom screen, then you've got like 75 members of the public on a Zoom screen. People don't know when to mute. We can't figure out how to mute them. It was a lot of fun. The words, "Hey, you're muted," became like the county motto for about a year. But one of the things that we've done is when we were able to go back to in-person meetings, we still have the Zoom option available for residents that we didn't have before. And so why in the world should somebody have to drive 40 minutes to come speak to our board for 3 minutes about an issue that's important to them? And so that's been a really good development for us. It's made it more convenient for residents to interact with their board. We also allow staff to do that. We allow them to present their resolutions virtually if they choose. It's their choice. And so it's really helped them to have some better work-life balance, and it's been really positive. So those are a few ways that things have changed for us for the better.
Absolutely. Efficiency. I hear a lot of that as well. All right, Jazz.
So, just building on top of what Nathan just shared, what we are seeing, and based on my job, I have the balcony view of seeing what is happening across companies through our customer data. And what we are seeing is that online meetings are on steroids right now. Oh my goodness. And that reflection that we had when we were analyzing our data also corroborates with other reports, things like what Microsoft published back in spring, where they shared that there's been 150% increase in meetings that employees attend since the start of the pandemic. 150% increase, and they have access to all our data. They know what our calendars look like, the Teams meetings, and so they used all that information. They're telling us that there's been 150% increase in online meetings. And because of all these meetings, what we are seeing through employee feedback is that employees are feeling burnt out. And this is especially true for remote workers. And again, that jives with some of the other reports that have come out, which put the number somewhere between 25 to 60% of remote workers being at the risk of burnout.
Awesome, thank you.
That's a little depressing.
Yeah. And just add that, people are craving at this point that human connection. So another data, and again, I'm a data person, so I'll throw that out, 45% of the people who want to come back to work and who are currently remote working is only for seeing their colleagues and meeting people in person at least occasionally. And what they're craving for is flexibility at work, and it's become less about remote or completely in person.
That's a great point. I think our workforce is scattered across the entire state, and so the benefits I think we see is reduced drive time, that ability to have that balance. But I went into the office today for just a retirement event, and it was like a family reunion. People crave that interaction. And so I think what we're seeing is when we come together in person, it's sometimes for different reasons than maybe we did before. And that's the beauty of it. We come together, we volunteer, we do collaboration, we do creative thinking, and then we rely on teams for a lot of that day-to-day work that, we can have quick discussions. But I would agree, we do have a lot of meetings. So. But lots of great balance there, and it's finding that right mix.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely what it's about, is finding that mix and seeing those priorities shift too a little bit to really prioritize that work-life balance. So did you have something else to add, Mary Ann?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to share, and it's a completely different perspective, but I had one employee, disabled, had been a remote leader for years and years. And she always struggled with, how do I prove my worth? How do I show that I can do this? How do I manage this in this environment where I'm isolated? And the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, her role was, I get to show you guys how to do this. I get to show you how good I can be. And for her, it was, all of a sudden, she's a leader, she's showing us how to do this, but she had never felt more engaged than before. And she continues to find that. We're continuing to find ways to be much more inclusive in our work environment when we can be that flexible.
That's amazing. I love the good story.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Awesome. All right, Dan.
I'm reminded a little bit of it exacerbated, whatever was already there got amplified to be more intense. I think that was something that we experienced in terms of we put a very high premium on social connection, being very intimately connected at Menlo. We have pair partners that we're sitting next to all day. You're never going to be working alone. And as a result, when the pandemic hit, we all got pushed away. We were geographically distributed. We're still very socially connected. And that was something that I think allowed us to kind of make it through. And now that we're emerging, we're starting to ask those same kinds of questions of, okay, well, are we going back to that? Are we going to put that premium again on the in-person space? And then also to double back in terms of the boon that we had of democratizing our tours, we also had someone who, prior to the pandemic, had the foolish notion to follow the woman he loves to Russia, prioritizing her over Menlo. And he got the same experience. He was a remote software developer for several years, and then March 16th, whatever that fateful day was, everyone goes home and he gets to be that guy who had run into the challenge of how do we perpetuate this culture of joy and collaboration that used to rely on being in person and being able to overhear each other to, okay, now we're in a Zoom room and it's just the two of us. So it was great for him to be able to fill that void as well.
And I do think that there's a lot of companies that have that same struggle of trying to figure out how to bring that culture piece back into it. And in my opinion, I don't know if any of you in this room are, many of you probably are familiar with Menlo, but you guys were doing culture before it really became like the sexy thing, right?
It's the first time I've heard it called sexy.
Well, that's what I'm here for. All right, so we'll start with Dan again. And this is a question for all of our panelists. But what technology systems are your employees utilizing, and what do they do for your organization? Would you recommend it for our audience, and why?
So this is a question that myself and my teammates are very used to hearing. And I think that tragically the answer that I have is a bit dissatisfying because what we find is that we care very little about what technology we use to solve a particular problem. So it doesn't really make a difference to us whether we're in a Google Meet, a Zoom Meet, a Teams Meet, or something else. Because the thing that's most important to us is that the two of us are working together and we're having a conversation about the work. So as long as you can get on a video call, camera has to be on, then everything is kosher. In terms of kind of work management, it's the same type of situation. You know, we're going from an in-person story cards, 3x5 index cards taped to the wall. There was a little bit of pain and penury around you can't copy-paste a written story card, right? Whereas when you have a Trello card, you can copy-paste from the email and then your eyes glaze over when you read it. But in the same vein, we don't really have a super strong opinion about Trello or I think Teams, Microsoft Project, or anything like that. Our main interest, and this is the same thing that allowed us to make that shift to remote, is not necessarily on the tool itself or the method by which you solve it, and has everything to do with what's the outcome you're looking for.
All right, so Marianne, how about you?
Yeah, so we rolled out Teams very quickly for our entire employee group, and I think it's the same thing because I do participate in a lot of calls where we use Zoom or other tools. One interesting thing you mentioned was cameras on. Mm-hmm. We do not mandate cameras on. That's something we're a little sensitive to because we do have some people who are uncomfortable in that environment, and just depending on, especially during the pandemic, you're inviting them into your home. So we don't mandate it, we highly encourage it, and you will find in meetings it's kind of interesting. Once one turns their camera on, everyone else may follow, but you'll have one or two that don't. But I can tell you one of the things I've really enjoyed about this is getting to see my coworkers in their home environment. You get to see the babies, you get to see the dogs, you get to see the cats, you get to see the chaos, all that fun stuff. But to me, it's been really sort of changing. It allows you to see things from a different perspective.
I agree. I think it reminded us all that humans, we're human. Yeah. So it adds that human factor back in. All right, Jess.
Yeah, it just reminds me of the early days of the video on or off dilemma, and me being on meetings with only my camera on and then just feeling awkward switching it off. Yeah. So now I just openly ask, okay, so is this cameras on or cameras off? So we are learning new things about engaging socially. But anyway, so in response to Janelle's question, there's this British anthropologist, his name is Robin Dunbar, and he says that human beings, on average, can have only 150 people that they can know really well. So in your personal lives, let's say you know 50 people really well. That leaves around 100 people at work, okay? So my recommendation to organizations with 100 people or more is to put in place technology systems that can help them understand and listen to their employees better. Because that's the only way you can systematically understand what is it that motivates them, what is it that's bothering them. And when you do that, and it often takes the form of, an employee survey, a deep dive survey once a year to get that data from the employees, and then combine it with occasional pulses just to hone in on some specific issues where you want to get that feedback from employees. But when you institute a system like that, make sure that you're always closing the loop with employees. You're telling them what you heard, what you're going to do about that feedback, and what you're not going to do about that feedback, and do that quickly. Don't do it 6 months down the line. And why that's important is that employees hate surveys precisely because they feel that their feedback went into a black hole, whereas in all likelihood, leaders were just reflecting on the feedback, and they're taking a lot of time coming up with insights. So that's kind of the technology system, I would say, leveraging technology to really scale employee listening in your organization.
Is there a name for that technology?
Culture Bee is one of them. Talk to me.
There you go. Nathan?
We have a very active and busy IT department, and I was meeting with them recently, and they were using all of the language that IT people use, and I realized that I'm now old enough to have an excuse to not understand what they're talking about, but I'm also still young enough that that excuse is fairly flimsy. So I try to stay up to date with what they're saying, but just to keep it simple, we use Teams as well. It's been a great tool for us. It allows us to chat with each other. So if there's something that falls between an email and a phone call, we just send a little IM that works out really well. We also don't enforce camera policy. We don't make people turn their cameras on. In the early days of utilizing Teams, I had a skeptic in my office who didn't think that we should be allowing remote work. And she said to me, Nathan, how are you supposed to talk to so-and-so, anonymous employee, if so-and-so is not in her office? And I just pushed a button, and so-and-so was like, hey, Nathan, how are you? And I was like, hi, so-and-so. What do you need? Nothing. And I turned it off. And the point was that I actually talked to them faster this way. So when people work remotely, it's really cool. Teams has been great for us. One thing we're rolling out right now is we're implementing soft phones through Cisco, which will allow people to place phone calls from their work line through the computer. In the early days of remote work, people really didn't like the idea of using their personal cell phone to make business calls, so we're trying to make that a thing of the past with this new technology, and just a handful of us have it, but we're trying to expand it now. So that allows them to answer their phone no differently than if they were sitting at their desk, and make phone calls no differently than if they were sitting at their desk. So we're exploring new products, but those are the ones that have enabled us to have a hybrid environment.
Awesome. We have come so far from that first Zoom call. All right, so I'm going to start with Nathan this time and direct this question to you. What are you seeing as methods to retain your top talent? Is it consistent among employees, or would you say it's very individualized?
That's a great question. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about our remote policy because I think it factors into this question. When we were debating how to adopt a policy that would work post-pandemic, what we came up with was that we were going to allow department heads to determine for themselves and for their own departments what level of remote work is appropriate. Now we have a couple rules and guidelines that have to be met, but outside of that, it's really up to the department head to decide how they want to implement remote work. And the reason that relates to this question is it shows them that we trust them. It shows them that they're valued. It shows them that they're enabled to make important decisions for their department. And I've worked for a couple counties, a couple cities, and a couple other places over the course of my career. And when top talent feels respected and trusted, they tend to respond well to that environment. When they don't, you have a revolving door. And so that's one example of how we're doing that. We've also been aware of a lot of the issues that everyone's facing right now, and so we've enhanced our employee assistance program, our EAP program. That's not just for top talent, that's for everybody in the organizational chart, where we can connect them with counselors who can help them not just with workplace issues, but with any other troubles they may be dealing with in their life. And so we've looked at that as a way to make things more available through these difficult years that we've had. We're increasing our pay. We have to be more competitive. I'll probably talk more about that in a little bit. We're utilizing technology better. We're trying to do everything a government can do to make us an attractive employer, and so far it's working out pretty well.
Awesome, thank you. And now I'm also going to ask Jazz to share, hopefully something on the data side of this.
No,
all right.
So, so the question was about How do you retain top talent? Is it a specialized action that you take around that, or something more generic? So I'll first throw a question to all of you. How many of you have seen the movie Moneyball or read the book? Oh, yeah. Awesome, quite a few. So I'll just recap. Moneyball is about how Oakland Athletics built a top baseball team on a very low budget and based on data analytics about their players. And the key message from that story is that when it comes to people, you can't go by generic data or trends. You can't go by generic or gut instincts. You have to go by data. And how that relates to an employee and organizational setup is that what I see is best practicing companies that have high retention rates, their leaders look for that type of data about their employees. They want to understand their employees. They want to understand what's really driving them. And once they know that, they can take very customized and tailored action towards that. So no two employees are the same. No two companies are the same. The only generic thing across your actions is to make sure you're listening to your people. And that same thing applies for top performers as well. If retaining your top performers is your top concern, you need to listen to them and do the tailored communication and tailored retention strategies for them. You can't go to Forbes or Inc.com and see the top 5 things you can do to retain employees. Sometimes it might work, but what you can do in a very tailored fashion for your culture and your people will be the most effective thing.
Well, we were hoping, but this is great. That's great information. Thank you. Now, Dan, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Sure. I was actually kind of pondering the question, and one of the things that I came to was that I'll argue that our strategy for retaining top talent is the same as it is for non-top talent, which is to never stop putting our Menlonians into interesting and new problem spaces. So one of the things, in the same way that we don't specialize in Trello or Teams or whatever technology that we use to do the work, we also don't specialize in the technology that we work in, whether that's C#, .NET, whatever, which means that developers and our, we call them our high-tech anthropologists, the business analysts, are constantly changing context, whether that be the technology they're working with or the domain that they're looking at. So it really never gets boring. And that's something that I personally find very interesting unto itself, but it also means that the expression I often use is, I feel like I'm dipped in professional fertilizer all the time. My project manager, I won't use her word, was asking me, does that mean you're surrounded in manure all the time? But that's something that I think has a lot of staying power for someone who's brand new to software development, that they're being put into an industry that can have a bit of a learning curve. It's very difficult. They're surrounded by a support system at the same time that they're being constantly exposed to new challenges. And I think that same philosophy or strategy is what applies to our senior and more tenured Menlonians.
Awesome. I love that. And you did tell me you didn't stink, so. I can attest to that. He's all good. All right. So we're going to start with Marianne on this next one. How do you create an organization culture? How do you convey your organizational culture to your employees?
This is a great question, and I think the only way I can share is through experience. I've been with consumers 25 years. Our culture has changed. And really what led us in a culture shift was our safety culture. About 15 years ago, we were 4th quartile in the industry from a safety perspective. We live in a dangerous environment. And so what we really did was we recognized something needed to change. And we sat down with our union and our management, and we partnered together to recognize we wanted it to change. We started to build the trust between those groups and solve the problem together. And it took a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of building. It didn't happen overnight, but we have completely changed the way our employees think about safety, the way they react to safety, how they respond. and we've moved from 4th quartile to 1st. So big success there. And here's just from my experience in being in the company for that length of time. Throughout the pandemic, one of the things we started leading our meetings with was a virtual safe detail board, which kind of, we start every meeting at Consumers talking about safety. We built this virtual safe detail board, which is basically, when you're in a meeting, here's the things we want you thinking about. But what we also did was we leaned in on our culture values. And so what we did was we embedded our culture values, which are things like caring, ownership, deliberate, agile, and embedded those into the safety tailboard so that every single day, every meeting, the first 5 minutes, we were all talking about those things. How do we show that we care? How do we show that we own things? And tying it into safety. But it very quickly became the language. It's the language of consumers. When we talk with our employees now, it's, gee, I'm showing that I'm agile because I'm doing this. I'm showing that I'm empowered because I'm doing this. And we all live it and breathe it every single day. And I think the pandemic is something that really helped embed that in us because we were seeing it. And it's something that I experience personally. I feel it. I feel and see the difference with our teams.
Amazing. I love it. Jess?
And I love the sound of all the data and the metrics and employee feedback that played into it.
Got lots of that.
Yeah, and I can't escape that question, right? So there are a lot of there's academic literature on culture. There are a lot of frameworks on culture, but I'm not going to talk about any of that. You can just, you go and read up on your own. What I'll just say is that it actually is very tied to what Marianne was sharing earlier, that culture really flows from the top, and it reflects in the actions of the leaders and trickles down to the actions of the employees right up to the frontline employees. And I have seen that many times in customer organizations, but the time where it really hit me hard was when I worked at Microsoft. I worked there for almost a decade. And at the time, Microsoft had a reputation of being this very shrewd, hard-charged, in-your-face, take no prisoners kind of a company. And they were around, at that point in time, there were 100,000 employees at the company, and trust me, everybody was like that. And I had the good fortune of attending an executive review meeting with Bill Gates. And what I witnessed was quite interesting, and it explained a lot about the culture of the company. So Bill would basically be very impatient and ask questions and interrupt executives and scoff at their responses. And basically, he had zero tolerance for any kind of incompetence. And he would tell them to go back and get better data if he wasn't satisfied with the responses. So that was the culture of the company. And and I'd attribute a lot of success that Microsoft had could be attributed to that kind of a culture. Now, that same personality that Bill had was reflected in his vice presidents. It was reflected in the next layer of general managers and in the rest of the organization. And I'm still in touch with my former colleagues at Microsoft, and they say that that obnoxious edge of the company has worn off since Satya Nadella took over, and it has had both positive and negative effects. So some of us old-timers, we have some fond memories of the culture that we thrived in, but really, it boils down to the actions that leaders demonstrate, and it just percolates throughout the organization.
Awesome. Very interesting. I'm going to jump back over here to Dan.
Once again, I wish I had a more satisfying answer, but one of the things that our co-founder, not Rich Sheridan, James Goebel, has often described culture as is the sum of human relationships in the organization. And that's something that I have found to be true. And again, tragically, I cannot then point to any specific thing that we do. There are many component pieces. You know, in person, we've got our values board that espouses here are the things that are most important to us, the critical behaviors. We have the mission statement, you know, end human suffering as it relates to technology, posted up on the wall. But if I think about it a little bit further, in some ways I feel like it's maybe a bit of a, it may trickle down from the top, but it doesn't evaporate because the people who are doing the work are perpetuating it. I think a lot about the people that work at Menlo, and I don't think you could look at any one of them and not say they're modeling for everyone else in the organization. And that's as close as I can get. I do think that culture is this kind of, you know, tree falls in the wood, does anyone hear it kind of thing. I wish it were easier to describe, but the sum of human relationships is really as close as I can get.
Awesome, thank you. And we're going to move on to our next question. I'm going to let Nathan take the lead on this one. Are you assessing your employees' satisfaction with their job and workplace? How often and how do you utilize the information?
We are. We're doing employee engagement surveys every year. We're actually just about to start our next employee engagement survey, and we use an outside company that assists with that, and that way I think employees feel really comfortable with sharing openly and honestly their experiences. I'm really proud of our results. We found out a week ago that we're going to be named a top workplace in Metro Detroit, largely based on our employee engagement surveys. And the overall health of our organization. And so what we found with our results is that we're performing higher than the benchmark for comparable employers. And the other thing that I'm really happy about, and Jazz talked about this a little bit earlier, is our response rate is really high. You know, we don't make employees take this survey. We invite them to, we encourage them to, and we have a much higher rate of response than most other employers. And I think that says two things. It says that they're eager to share their feedback with us, which is great, but I also think it says that it's not going to disappear into a black hole, that they're going to trust that the leadership of the county is going to do something with the results. And so we've had good success with that. We've seen our numbers do very well. And after the results come back, we have our consultant meet with our directors and kind of personalize strategies for how they can take their department results and address any issues that may have come up, or hopefully, you know, make the engagement even higher. So we do it every year. We start it in November. It usually wraps up early part of the following year, and about February or so, we're giving a report to our board on our findings. But I think we have to do that. We've done it for 5 or 6 years. Zero plans to stop doing this. May make some tweaks every now and then as we go, but we've had good success, and we've had a really good response and feedback.
Awesome, and congratulations. All right, Jazz?
Yeah, you're doing it the right way. So I just have one thing to say. You should do surveys as often as you have the stamina and the capacity and wherewithal to take action on it. And if you want to know about how you can do it better, talk to me.
Thank you. Marianne?
So I'll maybe tie into both of your points. We do employee engagement surveys as well. We do them annually, and then we do pulse surveys. And one of the things we found was we started off with these long surveys. It would take you an hour to do it. And our response rate was pretty low, and people are going, oh my gosh, when am I going to get done? And so we've now shortened it to, it takes probably no more than 20 minutes. And the data that comes out of that, we're able to drill down to a leader level as long as there's an appropriate number of direct reports. But it's really taking that data and building plans. And we've built cross-functional teams. So we have an employee engagement team that consists of reps from all across the company. They're actually, we have what we call a rally room where they meet once a week together. We look at what's going on, what different groups are doing, so that we're reporting, we're holding ourselves accountable for results and moving and addressing some of those issues. We're learning from each other and then building towards how do we keep getting better and better.
I love it. Awesome. Dan?
Menlo does solicit feedback about how things are going, but perhaps in a bit of an atypical way. We don't have a survey or anything like that. We have pair partners. you and I might be paired for an entire week working on a task together, and that is a nonstop exercise, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And what that means then is that as we're going about the work and doing the work, that means we're also sharing our successes as well as our failures together. I'm reminded a little bit of the life that I used to live in a more traditional kind of software development environment, where anytime that I did something great, I just kind of went for the high five and then there was no one there. Or conversely, you know, something very terrible happened and I just kind of have to sit there and stew in it. Whereas with a pair partner that, again, you're with all the time, you have someone there to, even if they don't necessarily go and solve the issue or change the environment, which they will still do, you at least have someone to acknowledge, yeah, that sucked, but we can keep going.
I love this pair partner. You gotta have one of those outside of work. You just take them with you, right?
Dog.
There you go, dog. I guess spouse, right? Awesome. So for our next question, how are you investing in your employees' professional development? And we'll start with Marianne.
We have a lot of different things that we do for our employees, from in-house training, external training, associations, professional membership. We have an education assistance program. Probably one of the coolest training programs I just wanted to share a little bit about with you is actually, and it's from the front lines all the way through our employees to our senior leaders. I don't know if any of you have ever read the book Extreme Ownership, but great book, and it's written by former Navy SEALs. And we have actually hired this company called Echelon Front. They're all former Navy SEALs, and they take us for 1 day in-house training, and then 1 day out in the field where we're actually doing battle exercises. And I can tell you I went through it, and what I found interesting about it was I came out of there feeling like a complete failure. Because you go through this training and it's sort of, here you have to lead this commando and you could be doing all kinds of things. You're given laser guns and all this fun stuff, and it's like, I got shot right away. But everyone comes out of that training speaking the same language, learning the same lessons. Frontline employees all the way through our senior vice presidents have all gone through it, and we still have a large group to go. But the feedback we heard from our employees, absolute best training they have ever gone to. And I think what I really like about it is it's not, gee, this group goes, we're all going. We're all in it together. We're all learning something together. So I think that has been our single biggest commitment from a development perspective.
Fascinating.
It's cool. You get to be a SEAL out in the woods, it's like with a gun.
Sign me up. Yeah. All right, Nathan, you get to follow that.
This is going to be so lame because we aren't Navy SEALs, but I wish that we could pretend to be. Maybe I'll talk to you later. Our budget reflects our commitment to professional development. Each department puts forward what they think they will need the next year for conferences and seminars and certifications, and we fund it. I've never denied a request to go get it. Kathleen, I think, agrees with me. I've never denied a request for training. We want to be very aggressive about that. We have a really generous tuition assistance policy as well, that if someone's in an educational program that relates to their job, we will cover half the cost of it. So it's pretty significant, and we encourage our employees to take advantage of that when they can. So I think we're doing the typical things, but I'm going to talk to Marianne about maybe doing some more fun things.
You can come watch us, yeah.
Oh man, we get to watch. That's even better. All right, and Dan?
I'll go back to maybe a little bit of the retention question, just that notion. I'm kind of still pondering the culture question, and in the same way that we retain people by putting them into really interesting situations and constantly putting them in a growth situation, that's the same thing in this case. And like the culture, I think it's an illustration of how it's the doing of the work that enforces culture, or that allows people to grow. One of the things that we'll say, again, you have a pair partner, that means that sometimes I'm going to get pushed into the deep end in a place that I'm not comfortable, like speaking at a local Q&A panel. But I've got a pair partner, Erica. But
Doing great.
thank you. But no matter what, even if you are being pushed into kind of that deep end, you've got someone there who is able to kind of support you and help you, which means that you can make the mistakes that you need to make in order to really, really learn and really grow.
Absolutely. If we're not failing, we're not learning, and we're not growing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And thus we need to, in some ways, we need to welcome failure for that exact reason.
Absolutely. I tell that to my son a lot. So what other ways are you investing in your employees other than professional development? And we can start with Nathan on this if you want.
Sure. We just finished a wage study. We do this every 7 or 8 years, but the way we did it this year was a little bit different and a little bit unique. We're seeing challenges with recruiting employees into public service, and so what we normally do is we take like 9 or 10 counties that are fairly similar to Livingston, and we say, let's look at what they pay, and we put ourselves appropriately in that box somewhere. This year we expanded that quite a bit. We looked at private sector data that we were able to get for comparable jobs. We looked at our cities and our villages and our townships. We don't often lose employees going from Livingston County to another county, but we do see employees go to other cities, other villages, and so we need to know how we can compete with what they're offering. And the end result was really good. It was about a 6-month study, and what was recommended to our board a few weeks ago was a $1.1 million increase to non-union revenue that's going to substantially bring us up into a much more competitive environment, because we want to steal all your best people and have them come work for us in public service. And we're not going to be able to do that with what we're paying, but we're going to be much, much more competitive. And so that's one way we're investing, and I really appreciate our board for supporting that. We're working on our 2023 budget right now. We've updated all the numbers, and thankfully we're in a very good position financially in Livingston County. Our revenues continue to grow, and so we're able to afford this, and we believe it'll be sustainable moving forward. So we've adopted a new pay grade structure that is heavily investing in our staff, and we hope it'll help us attract new people into the workforce as well.
Absolutely. Compensation. That's a big piece of it. Marianne?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of sort of looking at how to restructure our compensation and going through that process. But we're also really looking hard at benefits. And something we implemented this year, I think it was this year or last year, it might be last year, Mindy, parental leave policy. We expanded our parental leave policy, includes adoption, fostering, birth of a child to both parents up to 16 weeks that can be flexed over an entire year. So things like that compared to what we had before, which was 8 weeks for the mother. Huge, huge change in our thinking about how we have to work with our teams and our employees to balance their lives and give them all the things they need that aren't necessarily monetary.
Absolutely, and I think something that's interesting about that piece of it is this work-life balance thing keeps coming up, and if you're not allowing your employees, especially a new mom who maybe needs a little bit of time to recharge, what good are they to, and what are they bringing to the table? They're maybe there at 50% or 60%. So thinking about it from that perspective too.
Yeah, and I think about it from a career development perspective. It was a tough decision for a lot of families. You know, where do you spend your time? Where do you invest? And if we're giving them that time, the feedback we get is, I am so invested in this company because, you know, this is what I was afforded out of it. And it's just a huge difference in the mindset. So that work-life balance, that commitment to flexibility and being agile in how we work with our teams and as they're going through life, you know, it's really important.
Absolutely. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Yes, I just wanted to re-verify the question. It was investment outside of sort of just professional development?
Yes.
Okay. I will answer the question a bit obtusely in that I went to 2 conferences this year. But the objective when I went to both of those conferences had nothing to do with it had the least to do with my participation in the actual sessions. The first one that I went to was the company Menlo making an investment in me to go to a conference where one of our former clients was going to be. And I had a social connection with them. I paired with them through the actual early months of the pandemic, and this connection had persisted. And thus, when we went to the conference, I did attend the sessions, but it was really more of an exercise. It was the company illustrating it was willing to invest in me to travel, book airplane, hotel, the whole thing, not to go and attend the sessions, but to go out there and build this relationship and practice that skill, which was something that I really appreciated. That was a huge investment. It was the first time I'd ever really done that. And then the second example of the investment that was once again made was recently this year. There was the Agile and Beyond conference in Detroit, which was the same thing. I wanted to go, I volunteered to go, but the expectation was, like, okay, you're going to go, you're going to present. You have to go and give one of the talks of one of the sessions. That's the main reason that you're going. It has very little to do with, okay, you're going to, again, sit in the sessions. So I guess all of that to say that even when we are investing in professional development outside of very explicit professional development settings, we're still doing that.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. What an experience I'm sure you had.
So far.
All right. So we are probably going to have our last question here for the night. And this question is for all of our panelists. Do you anticipate your workplace looking different in the future? And can you explain those changes and why? So does anybody want to start?
I'll start.
All right.
So when I think about the workplace, I think about the workforce, and this has been a really positive discussion. But we have some bad news, that we should probably talk about too. We are having a real hard time recruiting people into public service right now and recruiting people into local government. In 2018, when Livingston County had a job opening, we had 62 applications on average. Last year, that was down to 20. And now, obviously, there have been some rough things going on the last few years, maybe a little bit of an anomaly. But I'm going to tell you, our 2022 numbers aren't going to be any better when we finalize the data. And so our talent pool was this big, and now it's getting to be this big. And so we're fortunate that we're still finding people in that smaller pool who do a great job and are able to do it. But, what does it say that so few people are looking at public service careers as an option? It's not very positive. And so we have to be really aggressive the next few years to make sure that we're doing everything we can to entice new people into our careers. I was really happy to see LESA get recognized tonight. We got really active this year with our job shadow days to make sure that young people and students in the county knew what we do in local government. I got to just completely entertain a How government class. Their last day of school, I was the guest speaker, so you can imagine how excited they were to see me walk in. But it went really well, and I talked to about 80 kids, and if 7 or 8 of them might think about a career in local government, we're going to be ready when they get back with us. And so for us, it is going to change. We have to find more creative ways to get people to do the work that we need done because, our jobs have to happen. We have to have people out serving the public. And so maybe not the rosiest note to end on, but we're up for the challenge. And a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight, we think are things that are going to allow us to improve that situation. And it's not just us. It's happening in government all over the country. If you look at city manager jobs, county manager jobs, director jobs, you're seeing places have to post 3, 4, 5 times before they find anybody they want to hire. So the creative things that have been talked about tonight are things that can help us in government improve the workplace.
Absolutely. Jez?
So on the one hand, employee sentiment is in flux, and employees are questioning what they want out of their work lives. So we'll see a huge spotlight on employee well-being, and what goes hand in hand with that is this ask for flexibility. So we'll see that. But on the other hand, good management principles will never go out of fashion. That'll still be there, and the traditional drivers of employee retention, things like compensation benefits, things like respect at work, feeling valued at work, growth opportunities, those are things that employees are going to continue to care about.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'll tackle this from a little different perspective because my focus is real estate. So thinking about the work environment, the buildings, what do they look like? And I think it's going to be very different. We don't know yet what it's going to look like in another 5 or 10 years. I can tell you our buildings are still pretty quiet. What we know is the standard little office cubicle that we all loved, or our personal space that we had, is probably no longer needed. When the pandemic hit, I had a nice little space. I even had an office with a door. I didn't have all the way to the ceiling. But when I packed up my office to move home, because we were all being sent home, I had all these cabinets full of paper and stuff. I came home with a little box this big, and that was all I brought with me. And it made me realize I don't need this space. That's not what I need to work. I was comfortable with it. I liked it. I could close the door if I needed to. And I think what I've learned and what we're thinking about is, one, we have not mandated our teams back to work. We have certain work groups that we have said, we need you there. But to create an environment, we've got to create an environment where people want to come into the office. Not where they're told to come in, where they want to be. And what we're starting to see is we're doing some test areas where it's collaboration space, team space, different types of seating, modular panels where we can move things around and slide around, save our notes, and work, versus you do need some heads down, quiet space, but not to the extent, because a lot of people will stay home. If that's the kind of work I need to do, I can do that from home quite often. So thinking about that environment, that's where our heads are at, is what is this going to look like? And we have 74 buildings across the entire state of Michigan. So we have a lot of facilities that we've got to be thinking about, and what does it look like? Where are we going to be? And it'll change. But we do know we want people in our buildings. We want our teams working together when it's right, not forcing it. So lots going on in that space. One example that I think is really cool that we have in place now, we've created some sample, we call them labs, but we're also testing things like, they're called framery units, which they actually look like a little phone booth, a miniature phone booth that is soundproof. And you can open the door, sit down, plug your computer in, have a conference call, and it is completely quiet. And it's the weirdest thing. I never thought I would use one, but I will tell you, once I tried it, it's the best thing ever. It really is, and you don't even feel like you're in a little phone booth. So it's getting comfortable with trying some of those new things.
Interesting. I want to try that too. You have all of the cool things that we want to try. Yeah. It is interesting too, that the synergy that you get from being in the 3D versus the 2D. So, yeah. Dan?
It's a very different vibe when you've got a real person in front of you instead of a 3-inch square. In terms of the change that Menlo is going to experience in the literal sense, we're moving. We're moving half a block west. So that's something that's going to be different. That is about the extent of the change that I know. And what I mean by that is that Menlo is kind of obsessed with experiments. It would be shocking to me that you walk into our space and ask literally anyone that you run into, what experiment are you running, and then not have an answer. So in that sense, it's kind of thrilling for me to imagine that, the Menlo that I'm working in today is going to look very different. I mean, just as an example, we've been reevaluating. That was one of the things that the pandemic made more acute, was the need to reevaluate how do we assess the pay rate of various individuals, and what does tenure and seniority mean. That's an experiment that is now 1.5 years in the running, and there are more experiments running every day. And like I said, in many ways, that's thrilling to me. The day that I walk into the office and Menlo isn't running an experiment, that's the day that I walk out the door.
All right. So he likes to keep things exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. If we could have a round of applause for our panelists today. You guys, we really appreciate the knowledge and expertise that you were able to share with us. All very interesting and different backgrounds. I love seeing the diversity of that. And right now, I think we probably have some people in the room that might have some questions. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. And Nick is back there, so it looks like he will, if you want to raise your hand, Nick will come over to you and we'll have some questions from the audience. All right, over here.
Hi, Jane Horrell with Go Live Co. Horrell Family Foundation. So how are you, I mean, a younger person coming out of college, starting right out, the pandemic really affected their job expectations, the mentorings. So what are your thoughts on how to get them engaged? Because there's a lot of young people that really, this pandemic, they do not like their jobs, and I'm on my way, I'm on my sunset, so to speak, but so I'm helping them and mentoring them. So what are your thoughts?
Does anybody from our panel want to try this?
I think I'll just share. I know probably one of the most difficult things during the pandemic was onboarding new employees, and we do have a fair number of younger employees, but I actually think they've adapted probably faster than us through this, some of the technology challenges, some of the opportunities and how they collaborate. It's a little bit different than some of us. And I think it's finding a balance of, one, allowing them to drive some of that and help us get better, and creating that situation where it's like they can teach me a ton of things. But also finding a balance of how do you create also that space where they come together physically in person, and you can do some of that team event, you can do some of that building of the relationships and the connections. And I think for us, that's the biggest thing for new employees, is getting them to start to build all of those individual connections so that they're not sitting out on an island.
I'll just add, based on, again, the feedback that we've looked at, and we look at data by tenure, and we see that very loud tenure as well as the generational thing that, first time in the workforce. And we see that feedback about employees feeling that they did not get a proper onboarding, for example. And there, I would just highlight the importance of managers' role in ensuring that employees get that full experience and feel that connectedness with the company. And I'll reiterate what you said, Marianne, which is that creating even physical spaces and opportunities for these employees to come together occasionally, at least, to build that connection with the team and the organization overall.
Yeah, we realized from the survey I mentioned earlier, one area where we didn't do that well was the first 6 months, the onboarding process. And so for younger employees or newer employees, we're having to respond to that to make sure that we're integrating them better into the workforce. And, we have some challenges there. Sometimes when we interview younger people, they, because of their experience through the pandemic, they want 5 days a week remote, and we most of our departments won't allow that. So we're trying to navigate through those things. But we are finding that young people are very idealistic, and they want to do good things for the world. And so we have to make sure that we're showing them how that can be accomplished through the jobs that we offer at the county. So it's a challenge, but we're learning pretty well as we go.
I think part of my answer to the question is going to speak to the nuances of what Menlo's hiring practice is, and I'll argue that it's the exact same thing as our onboarding process, which is to say that all three phases, in the first phase, you're pairing with another candidate. It's meant to simulate what is the thing that you're going to be doing all day, every day, and that is pair with another human being. Can you work in a shared problem space together? And then the second and third round, you are on an actual Menlo project with an actual full-time Menlonian working on a real client problem, which benefits in two ways. One of them being that the candidate is getting a very, very real sense of what does it mean to work at Menlo, because that's what it's going to be like for the rest of their career at Menlo. What it also means is that that relationship forming, that connective tissue that makes it so strong to stay and be anchored around a support system that you feel connected to, is formed instantaneously as soon as you start applying. And I'll also offer as well that that was something that was, once again, an in-person experience, but because of the remote and hybrid situation, it was like, all right, well, we'll just get into a giant Zoom call and then go into breakout rooms.
All right. Any other questions?
Hello. How do you monitor, or do you monitor, and how do you monitor the productivity as a remote session? So do you guys have any metrics you use or anything like that to share, like how do you see the productivity with the employees when they're working remote?
Oh, I can touch on that a little bit. And this, what I would be looking at is just from my experience as a leader, but we do have metrics that we look at, and not every role you can get to the level to measure productivity, but sometimes it's something so simple as, am I getting complaints? Am I getting customer complaints? That's kind of a little bit too late, but we look at how we're delivering, the percentages, the durations, and there is a lot of tracking there, but it's also done from an opportunity perspective. How do we get better? How do we get faster? How do we do things, less expensively? So it's not just done to say, employee A, are you producing X widgets, because we don't produce widgets, but how are we delivering for our customers, and how are we doing that? And as a result of those metrics, you can actually see at the individual level, the performance.
And your question reminds me of this insight we are seeing across surveys, that among very senior leaders in the organization, they still have some hang-ups and reservations about remote work. And the biggest thing that's coming in the way is, how are we measuring performance, and is performance suffering? And the way to get out of that, and I'm seeing that among a lot of customers, there's more attention being paid to OKRs and performance metrics. And that'll take some time, but you're basically pointing to that big issue, that big elephant in the room right now.
I'll offer one of the ways that we do it is it's qualitative, and that's we have a weekly show and tell with our client. So I don't want to bore the room with the details of software development processes, but we work in 1 week iterations. Each pair is given a set of story cards that vary in estimated effort between 2 and 32 hours, and then they go and work on that for the whole week. And then at the end of that week, the client joins us, whether that be remotely or in person, and then the client demonstrates to us the work that we have done on the software system. And that's our metric. We're not necessarily tracking, how many story points or hours per week are getting done at a given time, though we can produce those metrics and evaluations. By far the more interesting thing for us is that qualitative, what is the client experiencing?
I just want to mention one more thing. There are some of those automated tools that companies are experimenting with to see, are employees at their desk? Is the mouse moving continuously or not? They've, for the most part, been a big failure. It's just mushroomed this huge performance theatrics. So I would say, sticking with more traditional ways of thinking about performance, goal setting, and using those kind of, big brotherly approaches don't really work.
So to give the big brother approach, I'm just kidding. But we do, when we utilize Team, when an employee is working remotely, we do expect them to be available. And so Teams tells us right away if they're available. Green circle, I can reach them. X, red circle, I can't, or they're busy. And so now they still have virtual meetings, so there are times they won't be available. But we do keep track of that, because if I need to reach someone remotely and they're unavailable 7 out of 8 hours a day, we might have a problem. Fortunately, we haven't had that problem. And so, every employee of ours, no matter what department they work in, they're all responsible for some level of work product. And so we're just making sure that work product is still being delivered, and it has been.
Nathan, I just have a higher bar for Big Brotherly. Absolutely.
A couple other questions over here, looks like.
Yeah, hi. Tom Egan, new to Clara University. Very happy to be back in the office, more than in the home. Coming off mostly hybrid. I had a lot of experience in my former university talking to many leaders across many companies, across many industries, and including dropping in on some consumers meetings where I'm the only one looking at myself, wondering where everybody else is, and finding a culture of speakers turn the video on and everybody else kind of parks and waits. But in my previous organization, it was a video on culture, and I found my female colleagues saying it was more tiring for them because they felt like they had to be more on than maybe I did. I could be in a hoodie probably and get away with it more than they felt they could. But my question is, I got to talk to a lot of folks. I think Dell did an interesting presentation of how they felt they didn't lose any productivity, rather than how they measured. I'm not sure, but their report was they didn't lose productivity. And recently, I heard General Motors, Buick say that they said that we discovered that we're 20% more productive in the office. I'm not sure how they got there, so I don't have the footnotes on that. But I'm curious. I'm guessing it's different for everybody, because I also dealt with companies that went 100% hybrid. And personally, I like being in the office, but I'm curious how hearing we're 20% more productive in the office sort of lands with everybody up there.
I can at least start us off. I can't remember at what point in the conversation it came up, but there was something to be said about, I think it was about accessibility, the ability to just click a button and be able to connect with someone. And one of the things that we talk about at Menlo is Menlo is a place where help will find you even if you don't know it. Because in those situations where you may be struggling with something, you may not necessarily have the self-awareness to go and get it. You may just be sitting there spinning your wheels, and there's nothing in a remote environment. You can't overhear. You can't be the fly on the wall who's a couple spaces over and see that happening. So that was one of the things that was definitely a big change for us, was that where it used to be the case that my pair partner and I sitting at a project pod, and there's that two junior pair. They're running into that really weird sticky part of the code. Sounds like that we should go help them. We should go talk to them. That was something that was a lot harder to do, to be the help that finds those that need it in a situation where it's two people inside of one Zoom room that you can't overhear.
So I think it depends on the group. It depends on the work. And I would say my team is actually more productive working hybrid. Partly because we have a lot of field-based people. We're geographically spread across the state. And a lot of the work we do is interacting not necessarily amongst ourselves, it's with other people. So they have some flexibility in one, not coming into the office, leaving directly for a job, from their house. That saves them time, saves them energy. When they have heads down working time, they can get that focused time at home if they choose. I do have one employee that doesn't work at all. He's heads down all the time, but he wants to be in the office. And that's great. I think it's where it works best for the individual. One of the things I did find with my teams is less interruptions. You know, you lose the relationship piece to some extent, but less interruptions, more focus, and greater flexibility in when they get the work done too, which is a huge benefit for people. And for extroverts that need that energy and need that, that's where I think a big piece of the struggle is you could come into the office and you're sitting by yourself. So why come into the office? Because everybody else is at home. And I think it's, again, finding the right moments to bring people together and the right opportunities versus forcing it on, you know, you've got to be here X period, X period. It's, we're going to meet together for these types of things.
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question, Tom, and thank you for Dan and Marianne taking the option to respond first, because it really gave me some thinking time. And this question gives me the opportunity to further underscore what I've been saying, which is that tailored solutions to employee needs are really important. The circus tycoon, P.T. Barnum, he said that you can fool some people all the time, you can fool all people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And that somehow relates to employee satisfaction as well, that you cannot satisfy all employees all the time. And once you accept that, you can think of solutions, you can think of tailored messaging that makes sense for the employee segments. At the same time, you juxtapose the solutions with what makes sense for the business. And that points to, Marianne, what you were saying, that for some roles, you know, remote work may be productive, especially when combined with a group of people performing it who have a strong preference for working remotely. Whereas for some other roles, the jobs are designed such that in-person work makes it more productive. So really, like, you know, it's that juxtaposition of what the business requires and what employee preferences are.
What they said was very good. The only thing I would add to that is that just for the county, again, being a governmental entity, we're not forcing remote work. We're letting our directors decide what makes sense. I've not heard of a situation where a person has said, I want to be in person. The director says, I don't like you much. Why don't you go ahead and work remotely? Like, we're not doing that. And so it's really tailoring to an individual's strengths. If they can be productive remotely, great. If they can be more productive at work, it's largely up to them if they're in a position that has the flexibility to choose either option. And so, you know, if somebody is working remotely and they're not performing and producing, and that can't be hidden for very long. And so it's just worked out pretty well organically as we've kind of stumbled into it the last year.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it takes a lot of trust. It does, but the other thing I was going to say too is we don't call it remote. We're more on the hybrid now, and sort of our governing rule or what I have shared with my employees, my expectation is you are where you need to be. And once we understand, it's like if I'm needed at a meeting face-to-face where everybody's going to be there face-to-face, that's where I'm going to be. And it's worked out.
Awesome, all great answers. Thank you. Do we have another question?
From Hamburg. I appreciate the diversity of the panel. Looking to the future, what do you see as some of the headwinds that appear to be developing, probably specifically with the economy, finance, supply chain issues? What are your organizations contemplating, say, in the next year to deal with these, and what do you see happening?
Not everybody at once.
It takes a little bit of thinking, but I think, you know, great point. There's all kinds of issues we've experienced from a supply chain perspective, you know, just our ability to get materials to serve our customers. Transformers are a huge problem for us. And so thinking about alternate suppliers, you know, our focus too is we're thinking about changes. You know, it is electrification, it is all of the renewables development. That's where our heavy focus is on. How do we prepare ourselves for that future? What does our workforce need to look like, and how is it going to be different? Clearly the economy has an impact on our customers, in our company as well, and we're very sensitive to that, and seeing that increase in customer challenges right now.
That's a really good question, Pat. At the county, we typically do about $1 million a year of capital projects, related to our own facilities. And so if we budget for $1 million, what we think is $1 million now, it's not going to be $1 million next year. And so realistically, we're going to have to dip in probably to our fund balance the next few years to be able to afford to do the level of things that we've done in the past. But that's what we have it for. We plan ahead and understand that the economy is going to dip. In terms of inflation, we're trying to help our employees through that. In terms of cost of living adjustments, we're trying to do the very best we can to help them through that. And so we're budgeting a little bit differently than we have in the past. It's a challenging thing. Fingers are crossed that this is going to lift sometime soon and that the supply chain is going to heal itself and inflation is going to reduce. But I think we're in for a little bit of a rough stretch here. And so hopefully the public sector entities have managed their resources well, have planned for a rainy day, because I think that's where we're heading right now, and hopefully it'll be short-lived.
And inflation and gas price increases, these are top of mind things for employees. What we saw in the last 8 months of open-ended comments that employees submitted in the surveys, gas prices became one of the newer reasons for why employees don't want to come back to the office.
I am not much of a forecaster. I'm not one. I do know that some of the bigger tech companies like Meta, Twitter, I think they're in layoffs between 5 and maybe 15% in some cases. So that's something that I look at and consider to myself, okay, well, what's going on with them and what is Menlo going to do differently? And the best answer I can come up with is that I think Menlo is a little bit obsessed with solving the actual problem. And what I mean by that is that we are constantly having a conversation, not unlike the one that we have had about Teams versus Trello versus Zoom or whatever it may be. When we're working with our clients, our fixation is what's the actual problem that you're having? Because if we fix that problem for you, it doesn't matter whether we do it in Trello or Teams or whatever. That's the thing that'll have them coming back. We put a big premium on the relationships that we develop, and I think that's kind of maybe how I don't think that we're necessarily ignorant of those kinds of headwinds, but it's one of the things that we invest heavily in to shore up when those occur.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm just going to do a quick shameless plug here for our Chamber Alliance, because we are addressing supply chain disruption and artificial intelligence, generational problems all coming up in 2023, because we know that these are the headwinds that everybody is up against. So we have time for one last question here.
Hello, my name is Natalie Miller. I'm a small business owner. I own Grit and Lavender in downtown Brighton, which is a shared office space. And so I appreciate all your insight today, because I feel like it's all speaking to my people and the things that I'm doing to try and shift how we're working. But my question for you guys as a panel is, what are the opportunities that you're seeing for us to utilize in Livingston County for growth? What are the opportunities? And then also, if you had an unlimited budget, where would you spend the money? What opportunity would you see us dig into locally to expand, kind of forget the parameters that we normally have? What's that stretch goal, that crazy opportunity that we're looking for here in Livingston County that we should keep an eye out for?
If we had unlimited budgets, which we do not, we would probably be looking to do even more with new technologies to make flexibility in the workplace even more possible. We're using things that we have available to us now, but there are things that we just can't afford to look into. So I think we would invest pretty heavily in new technology if we had unlimited funding. Also, we would be, and I kind of touched on this earlier, we're racking our brains to find ways to attract people into the public sector. So we'd be looking for new ways to do that, because that's really what I see as the biggest threat to governmental entities, at least, is the declining level of interest in our jobs.
Oh, that's a really good question. It is, and I don't know that I have a perfect answer, but I think the things that we're investing in, similar along your lines, automation. How do we eliminate a lot of those difficult processes that are cumbersome? How do we make the complex simple? And I can tell you we're really good at making things complex. We are. And so how do we focus on just keeping it simple? Because that's what gets us that momentum that we need to move forward. And we get sometimes so bogged down. So I think those are kind of the things that we're focused on.
I am a little caught off guard because part of the high-tech anthropology job of going and seeing users in their native environment, we have this question we ask everyone. It's the magic wand question. If you had a magic wand, what would you wish for? Unlimited budget, unlimited schedule. And despite the fact that I ask it every day, multiple times, I don't know that I have a very good answer. The best I can come up with is one of the things, as I've described over the course of this conversation, is that we build skills by doing the work. Which then kind of by proxy means that you're really only ever building the skill that's relevant to the work you're doing right now. So one of the things that would be nice is if with that unlimited budget and schedule, we kind of had a little bit more of a deeper bench and had more ability and opportunity to be intentional about, okay, what is the work that we're going to do and build up that skill within the team, as opposed to kind of being, you know, we're very good at adapting on the fly and learning new things as needed. It would be nice to be a little more intentional about that sometimes.
Yeah, and I'll just say whatever they said. And on top of that, I think just the human capacity building, that just putting technology in place, that's actually speaks to a lot of younger generation, people who want to see technology at workplace, and they enjoy working with it, they get inspired by it, but alongside also investing in capacity building, capability building.
Awesome, great questions. And thank you guys again for all of the wonderful information that you shared tonight. This was just amazing to listen to the different levels of expertise, but like the diversity from each one of your industries is so different. So thank you. If we could just thank our panelists once again. And that concludes this portion of the program.
Thank you, Janelle, very much. I'll set it down. At this time, I'd like to invite John Vorhorst to the stage.
Evening, everyone. John Vorhorst with DTE Energy. I'm a member of the Economic Development Team at the utility. Before I start my very brief comments, I'd like to recognize the people that were responsible for putting this program together. The Spark team, Marcia Gabrowski, Tammy Salisbury, Nick Jablonski, Denise Murray, Jennifer Heyman at Spark and her marketing team, and what the heck, I'll add Phil and Paul, even though you guys just come in and take credit. We know you didn't really put much work into it. But, thank you all. This has been a marvelous program. And I want to thank the panelists. What a wonderful treatment of the critically important topic for this region as everyone grapples with the realities of the new way of working and finding and developing talent in this environment. I was particularly gratified by the panelists who shared that as human beings we kind of max out at 150 personal relationships. That's a huge relief to me. That means I can abandon my goal of developing intimate relationships with all 10,000 of my colleagues at DTE Energy. So thank you for that. In 2019, I came to this area. I should say I returned to this area after 5 years living in New Orleans, Louisiana. And it was a great year for me for a couple of reasons. I became a resident of Livingston County for the first time. And shortly after we returned, the pandemic rolled in, which meant that I could abandon my long commute into downtown Detroit to the DTE headquarters and sit looking out over Zuki Lake where I live. And my alarm clock there is the group of sandhill cranes. That roost out in front of our cottage. And if you live around sandhill cranes, you know exactly what I mean. They will tell you when it's time to wake up in the morning. I don't get that kind of experience when I move into, going to downtown Detroit, and I gave up 3 hours in my car daily for a walk down the stairs. Having said that, I also miss, the human interaction, even though I don't have to now work at 10,000 of them, which is gratifying. 2019, I also was invited to join the board of the EDCLC, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. I'd like to take a minute to recognize Nathan Bird as the outgoing chair. Nathan, thank you very, very much for your leadership. We're deeply appreciative for that. And be assured that as the incoming chair, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that, the wonderful board that we do have will endeavor to carry on the good work that we do here, applying intelligent development to the Livingston economy, supporting our local enterprises and ensuring that we have sustainable and thriving communities. That's our pledge to you, and we will endeavor every day to do that good work. I'd like to recognize the sponsors one last time before we close this evening: Comcast, ITC, Lake Trust Credit Union, Bank of Ann Arbor, Trinity Health, Consumers Energy, KW Corporation, Ranger Power, and my employer, DTE. We greatly appreciate the support of all those enterprises to help with tonight's gathering. And we thank you for your engagement and your interest in supporting the work that we do at the council. And I'd like to invite now Amanda Vickers with Great Lakes Credit Union, to close out our program for this evening. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, John. Lake Trust is proud to be a sponsor of this event, and we're honored to be supportive community that's dedicated to the well-being in the workplace and in our local neighborhoods. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers from today's event and to the Economic Development Council of Livingston County for their commitment to creating economic prosperity right here in Livingston County. There is power in all of us sharing knowledge and experiences to uplift each other, our organizations, and most importantly, our communities. The last few years have redefined many aspects of our lives, especially what the new normal in the workplace looks like. To successfully adapt and further develop our local economies, we must continue to work together to develop innovative solutions and support initiatives within our communities. At Lake Trust, we recognize the importance of supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs to enhance local economic development. And we have seen firsthand the growth and economic success that can be achieved by sharing knowledge and resources and providing resources that foster further progress. So today's event was another example of that. We've discussed and learned today how we can help each other and facilitate community and economic development in our own backyards. Together, we can make a positive impact. So once again, I would like to thank the Economic Development Council and the Ann Arbor Spark for hosting this event, and to everybody who is here tonight. Thank you.